This episode of Grilled is sponsored by Rationale, your leading provider in multifunctional hot food preparation equipment. Register now for a free Rationale live demo at www.rationale-online.com.
Thanks for listening to Grilled by The Staff Canteen. I'm Cara, editor of The Staff Canteen, and in this episode I want to talk about to open or not to reopen. So hospitality was given the go-ahead to start reopening, obviously guidelines permitting, on July 4th or the 15th in Scotland. So why have some remained closed? So joining me to discuss this is Alex Claridge from the Wilderness in Birmingham. Alex, I think you've already butted heads with the local press about reopening, so we can discuss that in more detail. But thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Roberta Hall from Little Chartroom in Edinburgh, who I believe you're set to open in a few weeks. Is that correct, Roberta?
A week on Thursday.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And Anna Haugh from Myrtle in London, who opened last month, so which is why I wanted you to be on this podcast, because I really wanted to hear kind of your views as someone who's now trading as you can, as well as you can. So thank you, Anna, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So let's start with Alex. Let's start with you, because obviously
It can only get
So for people who don't know, you obviously had said that, or no, you didn't say that you weren't reopening. It was something that came into your local press, and they didn't ask you for comments. So maybe you can expand on that a little bit about why you haven't reopened yet and what that is all about.
I mean, you say local press, which feels a stretch to describe the Birmingham local media as press, collection of potatoes with access to an online website. I mean, the story in question was we were very lucky. We did a kind of a crowdfunder thing when we first closed. And, you know, I was bowled over. We had over £30,000 worth of support pledged from kind of guests to make sure we open, which is insane. They ran an article kind of going, restaurant who raised all this money from guests announces they won't be opening, which feels quite scant on detail. I think for me it's kind of dual-fold. There's a practical application to it, that our restaurant is 22 cover space in an old factory. The toilets are, I believe we call them bijou, which means quite small, quite potent. There's very little from a structural perspective that we can do to make kind of COVID safe measures applicable. And I think also, and I think this will be really interesting to actually hear from everybody else, because I think this is probably an inherent fault with me, but I'm quite stubborn about the experience I want to offer. And whether it's I lack the imagination, whether it's just I'm too set in my ways, whether there's just a lack of pragmatism here, I've not been able to kind of envisage how we reconcile, I guess, the experience we want to offer to guests with a lot of the measures that have kind of floated around, particularly the landscape, where, let's be honest, clarity isn't something which has been offered in abundance. £10 off at Nando's is, but clarity is. So I think we kind of thought we're in a privileged position that we can sit back and kind of take our time. It's not really anything more profound or groundbreaking than just, you know, I've really struggled emotionally and kind of creatively with reconciling the world we have with the world I want. And I think that additional time to understand how it feels, to get to go and dine at other places and see how it feels and what other guys are doing, what works, what doesn't, has been really beneficial for us. We're aiming for a September 2nd reopen, and I feel it's given us that extra time to dig deeper creatively, to find ways to come back that still feels true and authentic to everything that's always mattered to me, but obviously is mindful of this global pandemic and the apocalypse that's on the way.
Such a cheery start to a Tuesday morning. The thought of an apocalypse. Thanks, Alex. So just to go back a little bit, when you heard that July 4th was definitely going to be the day that you could could reopen, was it definitely in your mind that that was not going to happen for you guys? Like there was just no way that could happen, and you were always in your head thought, no, that I'm going to keep this on pause for longer?
Categorically, it came sooner than I thought it would. I'm delighted for my peers who've been able to reopen, and I've enjoyed several great experiences since then. But it was never on the cards for us to reopen then. Selfishly, I'm kind of looking at going, well, August is generally a really crap month for us anyway. July would not be a time I'd ever choose to reopen. So I think we'd kind of settled on September, sort of irrespective of the government. Don't go well with other people having control of my destiny. So we sort of drew a line in the sand, picked a day that we thought would work for us as a business. And it just so happens that the government have kind of then done what they're going to do. But let Boris and his lot do what they're going to do. Like I don't put too much heed to it, to be honest. Okay.
And Anna, before we come on to you, Roberta, obviously you haven't opened either. Is it again similar reasons for Alex that you just you couldn't, or that or did you think no, I want to do it in my own time? What was your reasoning behind it?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons that are some similar to Alex. We wanted to take our time and just see how things went, see what other restaurants were doing, and just see if there was any more flare-ups and whatnot, because there's nothing worse than perhaps opening up straight away and then it starts to flare up again and we had to close straight away because that would be more detrimental to the business. Mm-hmm. Another reason was that we actually just opened up another business. We've got a promenade in Edinburgh, in Portobello, and we opened up a little sort of takeaway food truck sort of thing. It's more permanent. It's actually like a little glass pod, and everything's getting cooked on barbecues. And we just did that last weekend, and we really wanted just to focus on that before we then decided to reopen the restaurant, because that was obviously an easier thing to open up with regards to there's no sitting in, everything's takeaway. There's none of the sort of coronavirus worries that you have. And also we're getting work done in the restaurant to make it more safer and comfortable for people coming in. We've taken tables out and we're putting partitions in, but we didn't want them to look like the coronavirus screens that everyone has been putting up. So we've worked with the architects that have done the design of the restaurant, and with the builders that we've been using to do little bits of work on the restaurant. We wanted to design something that was nice. Yeah. And that's getting installed this week. So it was, we just wanted to, just take our time doing stuff to make it right.
Okay, perfect. And Anna, obviously you are open. So listening to Alex and Roberta, why did you choose to open it? And what are your thoughts on kind of what they've said on they were kind of waiting for the right time?
I totally relate to them. I didn't expect to open up as early as I did, but my landlord is still charging me rent. So, those bills just keep stacking up, and the longer it takes me to open up, the bigger the hole is that I'm in, that I'm trying to dig myself out of. I was really afraid opening up. I was afraid that nobody would come. I was afraid how people would react to the measures that we were going to implement in the restaurant, to kind of be as safe as possible. And it's just the unknown. Like it's really scary taking a step, doing something that is different than what you've done before. But then we just opened the door and then we just did it. Like you just kind of hit the ground and you just adapt. Like as chefs, we put so much thought into things and we're so used to the systems and the rules that we've had before because they're reliable. But, we've all been in services where your extraction goes down or somebody chops a finger off or, a kitchen porter storms out or somebody comes in drunk or, you're constantly adapting to dreadful, out of control situations. So I should have been probably a bit more confident in kind of saying I could do this because we're only small. That's a big thing, that we are a small restaurant, and I think that kind of makes it a bit more manageable. But it's been, it has been difficult, but it's been more positive than I expected it to be. This is the worst time of year for the restaurant to open. Like August, we normally close in August for at least a week. So the idea that we were opening at the quietest time, heading into a quieter time, for me, all of that was just like, oh God, so not what I want to be doing. But I really felt I was in a situation where, I didn't have a choice.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So, and I mean, you all operate pretty small spaces, don't you? To be fair, I think you're all very small covers. So, how does that look for you, Anna? Now, have you had to move out tables, or have you just? Yeah. Okay. So, what sort of things have you had to do?
Yeah. Well, in general, our tables were kind of reasonably distanced, but to actually really give it a bit more space, we had to move tables out, and it's just also the shape of the restaurant. Like, if we get only 2s, we will do a tiny amount of people, but if we get a couple of 4s, a 3, a 5, 6, all of that bumps it up, and still it's social distancing, it's all safe, but it's way better for us. But obviously with booking online, it's a first come, first served, you know what I mean? You don't get to pick and choose really who gets those tables, but yeah, like I was, we wear masks in the kitchen. We wear masks. Honestly, some of the pictures I've sent my boyfriend about the state of my face as I'm melting. I'm melting underneath the heat because it's been so hot recently. But the staff.
Do you forget you have them on as well? Because I feel like if you're going to taste, then you've got a mask on.
Oh yeah, it's so funny. I've seen people do that, spoon it. Yeah, it does make it very hard. We have like wooden spoons for tasting, so that's all disposable. There'd be loads of little details that we do in the restaurant to go a little bit above of what's kind of expected, but then the customer would never know, they'd never see that, and I'm really proud of that. Like, I feel the customers dining here would be far safer than dining in a person's house, with the way we would clean things down, the idea that when people arrive they have like a nice kind of a towel to clean their hands. We have sanitizer bottles on the table that are not very noticeable. We have a thing called handles. So when I say handles, my kitchen porter downstairs or a waiter or anybody I say handles to, they know the drill, and they go and they clean the handles of everywhere of their section that they know. And most of the time I turn around and you just see them doing it. So there's this lovely kind of feeling where people have just embraced that change, and there's no like, oh guys, we got to do this, or there's no kind of like, this is an extra hardship. I think everybody is educated with the media as in the importance of those little details of clean hands, clean handles, masks. Kind of they're all nicely fitted, particularly for the guys upstairs. I mean, the amount of masks you go through. You think socks are bad? Masks. I buy masks every day, 10 packs. And then I'm like, oh, I'll wash them. And then I wash them and I'm like, where are they? So then I'll just buy another 10 pack. So yeah.
Well, it's really interesting to hear like the different measures that you've put in, and I think this is kind of a question for all of you, that over the past, it's been a month for us in England. I know it was slightly later for in Scotland, Roberta, but taking a step back, and have you learned anything from watching what other restaurants have done, what other chefs have done, what has been said on social media? I know obviously, Anna, you're already open, but for Roberta and Alex, when you do open, have you taken things from actually having that time to look at what everyone's doing and how you can then put that into your own restaurants?
I think the thing about this is twofold. Firstly, and I'm sure this is shared by many a chef, I think we're all on the same team. I think it's very easy when you talk about the choices you're making for your business to sound like somehow your choices or your preferences have a quality judgment that is better or worse, and that's simply not the case. Like, it's really interesting listening to Anna, because if our landlord had taken a different position, we wouldn't have had the luxury of going, okay, we want to sit back. Everyone's working in a constantly changing environment, and it's on fire, and missiles keep arriving. And I think that's really important to note. So I don't think anyone's done anything wrong. I don't think it's the right time to be negative about it. And I think the face mask is a real challenge, because, do I enjoy restaurant experiences as much with the staff wearing face masks? I don't. For me personally, it definitely knocks a lot of the magic out. Do I think that potentially that's going to be unavoidable? Probably that's going to be something which we're going to have to tolerate for a significant period of time. I think, I've kind of been to places that are both at the very top end. I was at Helen de Rose at the weekend, and a bit of place like Hawthorne and Dishoom as well, where I think they've put a lot of thought into it. And I think what's been heartening is the level of detailing, and just as Anna was saying, you can tell that operators are really working creatively on this. I'm not in the celebration camp. There are certainly some restaurants which I think are almost trying to turn into a positive PR spin. How exciting it is that we've got all these new measures. Look at my jazzy screen. It's made of perspex, and you can't even look at me. I don't think we can celebrate any measures of stuff that any of us want to do, and I don't think any of us want to do it. You know, it's additional cost, and it's certainly not what any of us go into hospitality for. But I think what's been lovely is, this is a very creative industry, and I think across the board, people are now starting to find their own way, their own style of doing this, whether that's, jazzy face masks or, oh, have you smelt our hand sanitizer? It's on brand, but the detailing's, really exciting. And I think it's made me feel more comfortable that there is a way to make it our own, that whatever measures seem appropriate for a September opening, and I suspect it'll be broadly similar to what we've got currently in place. In all honesty, I don't think we're going to have much more easing in the meantime. It's kind of, it's inspired me. Like, this industry always inspires me. And seeing those trailblazers who, for practical or other reasons, have had to forge ahead, find a way to make it still classy, find a way to make it as much their own as possible. I think that's been really comforting, because I was genuinely, kept me up at night, how on earth to find a way to kind of do things that still feel authentic to us. But I think others have shown me that is doable. So yeah, that's positive.
Okay. So nothing jazzy for you when you open then?
Keep it low, everything will be black, and we'll just prepare ourselves for the end.
Roberta, what are your thoughts on it?
It's a discussion that myself and my husband have had a lot, and actually it's interesting hearing what Anna was saying there with regards to the few things that she has done. We're doing a lot of what we're going to be doing a lot of what she said, but the most recent one has been the face masks, and I am in agreement with Alex that I do prefer going into a restaurant where the front of house staff aren't wearing them, because I've been to some places where they're wearing the visors, and it's such a weird, surreal experience. And then I've been to another restaurant where they're not wearing it, and it just felt so much more relaxing and normal. There does need to be a sense of that the practices are in place and people are being safe and following good cleanliness and good guidelines. But yeah, we've been discussing the face masks, but I think we are going to have to put them on for hopefully just a short period of time. We are a very small restaurant, and half of the kitchen is in the restaurant. It's at a bar countertop. So I think for that, we're going to have to wear masks just to make people feel a bit safer. But the wooden spoons idea, that's great. I think I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal that one. Yeah. That's
get the chip
I didn't
ones.
think of it. Yeah.
Get the chip ones.
Get the really cheap ones. Yeah. Perfect.
Oh, brilliant. And Anna, obviously being open, you've probably already over the past few weeks changed things, learned things, seen people do things that you hadn't thought of. So what have you learned over the past few weeks?
Well, I definitely I agree with what Roberta was saying about the visors, because loads of people asked us, would we not wear visors, because then you can see people's mouths. But the visor, is a pretend protection, and if anything, you'd have to wear a mask and a visor. So what I was really glad with when we first opened, that we got the right masks for people's faces so that they actually fit. The kitchen, we go through a lot more masks in the kitchen, just with the nature of how we have to take them off to taste, so they get dirtier. So I'd go through probably 2 or 3 masks a day, where the floor can wear a mask for a shift. They don't remove them, they don't pull them down, there's none of that. And I went to a restaurant recently and everybody was wearing masks, but they didn't fit them properly. So they would fall, they'd be talking, and as their mouth would move, it'd start creeping down, they'd see their nostrils, they'd see their top lip, and you feel genuinely like, just take them off. If that's the case, don't wear them, because it's pointless. So Daniel, my manager, got some really lovely masks. They're very simple, they just have a little logo on the side, but they comfortably sit on the staff's face, and they're like I said, they're kind of a little bit low down, so there is a bit more animation from the face. So I think that's important. What I've learned since we opened is like anything in our industry, be consistent. You said you're going to do it, and make sure you're doing it as the best you can, and that's what we're doing. So yeah.
I just think it's listening to you all talking, isn't it mad that we're sat having this conversation about the best masks and whether to put up a screen and, you know, visors. Yeah. It must, I mean, I know Alex, you said you'd had like sleepless nights about whether you could even do what you did before, so it must be mad to sit here having this conversation, you three all together.
I lost most of your audio, Cara, but I'm sure it was gold.
Oh.
Yeah. I heard you say that I was having sleepless nights, but that's nothing new, Cara. So which sleepless nights were you referring to?
About whether you could do what you were doing pre-COVID.
It's funny because I think this is the time of year normally where if we were doing these discussions, we're having like really funny, what feel like trivial, pointless discussions now around predicting what might be in the Michelin guide and all that sort of thing. And now we're talking about the best fit of cotton face masks. So how the mighty have fallen in this industry.
Well, normally in August, I wouldn't have been talking to any of you because you'd all be on holiday and I wouldn't be able to get hold of you. So are you all confident now or not? And this is another one of those kind of predicting questions, that hospitality does have a chance of getting back on its feet, because it was very scary at the very beginning. You know, when we first had to close and there was no clarity on what was going on. Do you all feel a little bit more confident that we may get back to some form of normality or a new normal?
No. Next question.
There's a lot to get past, I think, before we can be confident of anything.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear you say that, because I thought you would be like, oh, well, it's like, you know, like, I'm
opening positive one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I think my issue here is that actually, at the moment, the government are on a PR enterprise to show all the fantastic things they're doing to save the industry, but it is PR. Like, you know, it's not even so much, you know, my personal self-interest. I've got a small restaurant and I'm stubborn and a little bit like a cockroach. I don't really die. I just but that's fine. But I'm as concerned for everybody else in the industry. You know, I love the industry. I love going out to eat, to drink, and I want it to be a rich and diverse place. And I think, however, you know, I pray and I hope that all three of us on this phone call, I think, you know, all of us know what we do and we have a good customer base, and that sets us up perhaps better than some. But this industry is going to be significantly smaller over the next, I think, 2 years. I think we're going to see mass casualties. And what worries me is that with the media kind of releasing and peddling this, oh yeah, eat out to help out. Yeah, boom. Oh, Rishi, isn't he handsome in a sort of relaxed way? Like, you know, all that stuff. The worst is yet to come. I think the next 12 months are going to be tough. In Birmingham, we're seeing every other day at least one independent going under now.
Really? Okay. Well, yeah, because I was going to ask whether you thought maybe London might take the brunt of it. And obviously, Anna, you're in London, just purely on the fact that there are so many restaurants in London. Alex, you've obviously started to mention already that you're seeing people go under. Anna, Roberta, what's your thoughts on it? Like, are there going to be a lot of casualties? What's the feeling in Edinburgh? What's the feeling in London?
Well, I definitely think there is an element where if you are not kind of thinking outside the box, if you are not trying to adapt in some way, you won't survive. There isn't the same footfall coming through restaurants that would have carried you before. I think that I agree with Alex and what he's saying. There is definitely a PR exercise going on with the government, but I also do believe the government has done things that if you'd asked me 6 months ago, would they do this? I'd be like, no. They have actually really tried to implement things and implemented them really, really quickly, like the furlough scheme. You think about how long it takes the government to do anything. And then they came up with the furlough scheme, and they rolled that out pretty fluidly. And so they have done some things that other countries have not come close to doing or have talked about doing, but didn't have the structure to implement it. I think the support, what is it, Eat Out to Help Out, the best benefit of that is that it's a very clear message to the people to go out and eat. It's not really about how much money is off. It's the opposite of what we were told during lockdown, which was don't eat out, don't eat out. So this was a lighter way of saying go eat out. You know, here's a voucher that is completely uncomplicated, that everybody gets the minute they walk through the door, Monday to Wednesday. This just comes off their bill. And then you just make sure that you tally up your stuff properly, so then you claim the money back. So it's actually very fluid, again, like a very well thought through plan, which, I mean, a tenner off a meal, for if you have a tasting menu and wine pairing, a tenner off is neither here nor there, but you get it anyway. You don't have to, once the restaurant's applied for it, you just get that tenner, you know. Yeah. So it's or, you know, 20 quid or 40 quid, it depends when he's at the table. But I mean, it is just an incentive to tell people that the government thinks you should eat out in our industry. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. So originally I was afraid. I was like, God, should I be part of this? Does it cheapen my brand? And I'm like, no, it just tells people that the government thinks you're okay. If you feel safe, you should eat out. And I think that's a really, really good thing.
So what is it actually like in London? Because I have not been down there since March. So are people starting to go back out again, or is it still quite quiet? I've heard different things from different people.
Different areas. It's all about what area you're in. So some areas are really busy and bustly. Shops, I think, have been hit in a way that's off the charts, phenomenally bad. Like, I've never, any shop I go into, except for a supermarket, obviously, there's no queue at a till. Like, there's nobody in shops. All those shops are going to close. There's a huge focus, for whatever reason, on our hospitality, thank God. But, I mean, there's going to be so many casualties everywhere. But I think there's certain areas are really busy and others aren't. Like where I live in Streatham Hill, that area has just stayed really chill the whole time. Nobody panicked. It was totally fine. Chelsea, where the restaurant is, was like a ghost town for a long time. And now it's bustling up, and you see a lot of students around, which I assumed they should be at university. Now they're back with their parents. So there's a different type of kind of person around the area. And in Chelsea and in Streatham, where I'm from, everybody wears masks a lot. A lot of people wear masks. There's no issues with like being on a bus or a tube or a train. Or I see a lot of people wearing masks. People just have gotten used to it, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And Roberta, what about you? Do you agree with Alex that kind of the worst is yet to come?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on what area you're in, and London could get hit harder. In Scotland, we've been quite lucky. I think we've had quite a lot. You know, it's not been as bad up here. But I have already seen some casualties in Edinburgh. A restaurant that I used to work in had to close down, which was a very, very sad day for me. And I think we will see more. What's encouraging is that there are people out and about. Even just the last couple of weeks, we're really, really seeing people don't appear to be scared to go out. I'm seeing busy restaurants, as busy as they can be. I'm seeing people sitting outside on seating outside, which luckily for us, the council have been really quite lenient, allowing seating outside, I think, to try and make things better. We've just been granted seating outside. Unfortunately, we're very weather dependent in Scotland. Yeah, generally pretty bad. But the big worry is the wintertime, when we're not able to fight things off as much, and when they predict perhaps another spike. And if that does happen, then things could get clamped down again, and that's when, and we could just be doing this for, like Alex says, for another year. Each time the winter comes in, things revert back to how they were for the first 4 months of the year. So it's a waiting game.
As everyone, you will all be open by September. So is that something you worry about, a second spike, and the possibility of not necessarily a mass lockdown, but a lockdown in your particular area? Is that something you will worry about?
Definitely. Yeah. I think also that fear of somebody gets sick at work, or somebody reports. Obviously, we all have to do the track and trace, but if someone reports in, I've ate in your restaurant last night and I've just tested positive for coronavirus, and it's the implications of how it'll affect your restaurant, because we have a tiny team here. So if one of my members of staff gets ill, or if I got ill, then you've got to go, is it 10 days now you've got to isolate? They've extended it again, I think. And that's a massive, the knock-on effect of that would be really, really bad. So it's all very scary.
Yeah.
I think the second lockdown is actually the scariest proposition because, we've used our reserves to survive this first lockdown. And, we're not forecasting, this is not going to be a financial year that breaks any records. We're expecting to be probably 20%, 25% down on quarter four, in which case we're not going to have recouped reserves, which means the second lockdown, can the government actually afford to do the same measures again? I suspect not. For all I think I have more cynicism than perhaps everyone else's conversation around the government measures, but I do acknowledge absolutely these are unprecedented support, but I don't think they can afford to repeat them, or they can, but they'll also be like, good news, we've saved restaurants. Unfortunately, we can't afford the railway network and we've gone back to feudalism, which feels well, this lack of concern for retail is worrying me because Birmingham City Centre, we've already lost John Lewis, and obviously, as a cliche middle-class white male, I'm lost without it. Where will I buy my affordable clothing and homewares? But that's gone. There's administrators looking at all the major shopping centres here. If retail is allowed to fall, hospitality will follow, because Birmingham City Centre, if we lose all of our retailers, and if the offices don't come back to work, the city centre is dead, and already suburbs, I think, are doing better than city centres. And I think a second lockdown will absolutely kill off retail. I don't think they'll survive because they're already not surviving. And if we lose that sector, I think hospitality, it is all kind of connected, isn't it? So yes, second lockdown, no thank you. Not today.
No. No, we don't want that. Not at all. Talking to you all about how you have to change the way you're working, how much is it going to change, or maybe it won't change, the style of the food that you're serving, the menus that you're putting together? Like, how much of an impact is it having in that respect? Are you having to make menus smaller? Talk me through how that's going to work if you're not open, or if you are open, how that is for you now.
We actually went, I always said once the restaurant was open a bit longer, we would put on a tasting menu, because I was very focused on regulars and I wanted people to feel like they could come and have a lovely meal regularly, if you know what I mean. But since the lockdown, we decided we'd have less covers, so we would focus on developing a really good tasting menu with a really good wine pairing, so that people, and also with the style of restaurant that I have, it's absolutely got so much Irish influence that you wouldn't get anywhere else. It's a bit of an experience, so it really has kind of worked out quite well. So it's slightly finer, still the same kind of informal, friendly approach from the staff. So they're all really well trained, but there's no stiffness to when they're serving the customers. But there's definitely more detail that goes into what we serve than we did before, because I'd rather not turn tables. I'd rather keep people here for longer, and maybe they would spend a little bit more money because of that. And people before were always going somewhere for a pre-dinner and then somewhere after dinner, like when you have a night out, where I think people are more comfortable having their pre-dinner drink here and then maybe having a after dinner cocktail instead of going somewhere else. So trying to kind of make them feel that that's we've thought of that and we're taking care of them, and that is what we've gone with. But and we still obviously run our a la carte, and we have our du jour and stuff like that for lunch. But I think the tasting menu was a good idea to add to our menus.
And Alex, Roberta, what about you?
Roberta, after you.
So I've not really changed much with regards to the menu. We already had a really small menu because it's a tiny restaurant, and so I've got zero fridge storage space. And it's casual. It's not extremely casual food, but it's fairly casual. And we've decided to close for lunch. We don't do lunch anymore because, whilst we've been doing lockdown, we've been doing deliveries, and we've decided to continue doing some deliveries on Fridays and Saturdays, as we did the numbers, and we would make, if we were able to do a certain amount of deliveries each week, we would make more money than trying to get people in for lunch and turn the restaurant around and be ready for dinner. So we're opening earlier. We're going to try and do 3 sittings and just do it 4 nights a week. We've also dropped a day because I want it just to be one team. I had a chef before that was kind of part-time work, but he's actually gone to the new business. And so we're now operating a 4-day week with still a small menu, not changed. And I mean, time will tell. But I think we're giving something like an hour and 45 minutes for each table, which is a little bit terrifying, thinking to try and get that back in time. But we're also just hoping, I mean, Anna, you might be able to have a comment on this, but I think, are people being more understanding with regards?
They're so relaxed. People, the people who are coming out are comfortable, and this is the people you want to come out. People keep asking me about, oh, how can you convince people to come out? And I'm like, no. If you don't feel safe, you stay at home. You stay there. And then the people who are coming out are excited. They're like, oh, I'm out for dinner. The way I am, like even before lockdown, I get excited about going anywhere. I'm like, what? Where's my champagne? Somebody feed me faster. I love all of that. And I think the customers walking through the door are like that. Some people don't like the mask and will say, take the mask off. And I'm like, God, how do I have to explain to you that? But eventually, I think they'll just get used to it. But no, I think the customers are very comfortable. Now and again, you might have somebody who's a bit uneasy, and we have a few tables outside, so we try to save that for them. You can't book outside, so it's kind of first come, first served, because otherwise we just didn't want there being any confusion about, oh, I thought I was going to get an outside table. So that's one thing that we were very sure about. Originally, we were going to let people book the outside tables, and then we just thought, no, what if it rains? No, because although it's not Scotland, it's still England. So plenty of rain floating around.
That's really funny, because that's literally one of the last conversations that I just had about, because we were about to have outside seating, and we have decided also not to book it out because of those exact reasons. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
So, I wanted to talk about maybe a change in style, if that's something that you're considering or have had to do, because some of the, Alex, you mentioned earlier, kind of joking that normally this time of year we have the conversations about who's going to get stars, and the guides conversation starts coming up. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on, some of the big boys are not opening, or they've completely changed their style. They're not doing anywhere near the same stuff that they were doing pre-lockdown, and just wondered what your thoughts are on the guides and what effect that will have on them. Will people still take them seriously? Are they still going to be able to give people stars or take away stars, considering what has gone on? What are your kind of thoughts on the guides, Alex?
I don't think this year is going to be an incredibly important year for guides or accolades. The guides will always have their place. I think there is too much history and there is too much prestige, and I simultaneously don't want to care, but I do. Everyone does. No one's immune to it. So I think they'll have their place, but I think perhaps there's going to be a bit more of a shift. I think there's definitely a shift towards what matters about food. I found that over lockdown, when we were in the heart of lockdown, what was it that fundamentally most of us missed eating? Because actually, it was really simple, humble ingredient-led cookery. It wasn't necessarily kind of an elaborate tasting menu that I was craving when I couldn't leave. Mostly it was steak or oysters, or just very straightforward cooking. And I think there is more of a value around food as the freedom, right? The kind of community, the social, the thrill, as Anna says, about, oh my God, I can leave the house. So I wonder whether it's going to see a swing away from perhaps how much taste menu led or kind of lux led dining dominates. I think maybe it's going to be more around, just fundamentally food that's good for the soul, right? That's certainly what I've craved, and I think in many ways where our food will swing. But I'm quite excited to see how the guides do evolve with it, because whilst I will reserve my judgment on Michelin partnering with TripAdvisor, which feels like a good idea on every level. It'll be interesting to see creatively what else perhaps guides can do to play their part in championing hospitality. I've seen some really emotional tweets from Michelin, some really lovely stuff, and that's been great to see. Maybe we'll all become more human and a little bit kinder, or maybe we won't.
Well, I have tried to get an answer out of the guides as to exactly what is going to be happening, and I think because like everyone, they're having to kind of evolve daily. They're not really sure what is going on. So I have tried from my point of view, because obviously I'm sure a lot of people would like to know and get some answers. Maybe it's not at the forefront of people's minds, but there will be people that are thinking, am I going to keep my star? Am I not going to? You know exactly what I mean. So it would be good to get a bit of clarity from Michelin and AA and people like that, but that is yet to come, so I can't shed any light on that at all at the minute. Anna, what about you? What are your thoughts on, I mean, you're such a new restaurant, and you know the guides are or were very important, so
I think the guides will always be important. Like, people, you know, they're popular for a reason. They're very reliable. When you go to a city that you don't know, like they're, you know, particularly Michelin, you're definitely going to use that guide as a guideline. But right now, I think everybody's mainly focused on taking care of their business and trying to adapt to, you know, what this new world is. I can't see people who love food and care about the restaurant industry dropping their standards. I don't see, you know, any of the restaurants I'm dining out in, I don't think that people are blasé about anything. I think if anything, people are more streamlined and they're more focused. So I think if restaurants just stay consistent with their brand and the food that they want to serve, I think that people shouldn't worry about what the guides will do. If the guides come in and slaughter everybody, that would damage the guides' credibility to the customer, because the customers want to support us. So yeah, I'd say it will be a quiet year. I don't think a lot of people will lose stars. And I wouldn't imagine there'll be a whole lot of new places because of the short period of time both guides would have had to dine. Because even if they viewed somewhere before the lockdown, they would have to review them because of the changes. So I can't see there being this being a very active year for AA and Michelin.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. I mean, it could be brilliant. There could be like 10 new 3 stars. There could be like, you know what I mean? Loads of, you know, restaurants lose their stars, which would be terrible. Nobody ever likes people to lose. That's always the worst. I hate that.
No, it is. And another topic that I just want to venture into whilst I've got you all, no-shows. How are we all feeling about no-shows? That has been a running problem. It's not new, but obviously some bigger names have started shouting about it, so it's come to the forefront again. What are your thoughts on it? How do we stop it? Why do people do it? I'll never understand that, but that's just me. If I'm going to go for dinner, I'm going to go for dinner. So yeah. What are your thoughts on no-shows? Roberta, I'll start with you.
Well, we take card details from everybody, because it goes back to people. They do it again. Don't quite know why. I think people still view restaurants. They don't think about the knock-on effect of how detrimental it is to businesses, especially small ones. Of them just not turning up. They don't take it as a serious, sort of thing to just not go out for dinner. It is very strange. I don't get it either. But because we are tiny, I think when we first opened, I think when we first opened, we didn't take credit card details, and we really lost quite a lot of business. And so then we implemented it, and it's amazing how much of a difference it makes. Yes, you might annoy and piss off some people in the process when you're asking for the card details. But at the end of the day, it stops us losing so much money. And we've actually made a decision. So normally we would just charge £30 per person. But we're actually going to increase it to £45 per person, because we had 7 tables. We have had to take 3 out, so we've got 4 tables left. So it's really important that everyone turns up for their meal. So
yeah, absolutely. Alex, what did you think when you saw it all kicking off on social about no-shows?
It's old game for us, isn't it? I got 3 years ago when Whiskey Alex, who was a different person, it turns out. Of publishing names and addresses after 16 out of 24 no-shows. I mean, to be honest, I think sometimes as an industry we just need to be more direct, and we need to be less afraid of upsetting people who aren't the right guests for us regardless. And there's all sorts of discussions, but I'll say time and time again, the only way to eliminate no-shows is to make a deposit or prepaid mandatory. We switched to TOC. Through that, we take a deposit that is the cost of goods for us. So we take 30%, which loosely speaking at least covers cost of goods per person and their firstborn child. If they don't show up, we send the child back. And I have to be honest, for us that, we maybe have one no show a month and that's it. And if you get the ratio between accessibility and making sure people take it seriously, because I spent a long time trying to understand the rationale of people who no show, but the thing is, we don't know anyone's experience, we don't know their story, we don't know their mindset. And I think it's a mistake to assume that all people who no show are terrible humans. Like, you don't know them, you don't know what's going on in their life. People are mad, genuinely, I think we can agree on that. But I think, you can talk around comms, you can talk around making them understand the story. People just don't give a shit. If you don't take their money and put an economic judgment on the value of that experience, people will continue to no show. I know firsthand how devastating it can be economically. And I will always, I'm not paid by TOC, although if they're listening, I'm available for paid work. But, TOC or systems similar to it are the only way forward. And it's longer term. I think it's about reframing the dining experience as an experience. I think retail and restaurants alike, we need to focus on what is it about this inherently that makes it special? Why is it better than Deliveroo? How can you not get it online? How can we reframe the experiential and real life as somehow sacrosanct or in value that people will appreciate it more? And I would have liked to have thought that having no restaurants for 4 months might have done that, but it turns out that even isolating someone in a house for 4 months doesn't fundamentally change human nature. So it's like the deposits or prepayment, anything else is just a waste of air, in my humble opinion.
Okay. And so I wanted to do this call with you all to talk about opening or reopening and whether or not to do that. Are you all, would you change anything? Are you happy that you decided not to reopen until you're going to? And Anna, are you happy that you opened when you did? Or would you, in a different world, would you have rather have been able to wait?
I wished I opened. I have a second business called Anna's Bistro, which is like a French kind of a style of food, kind of casual bistro. It's so delicious. I love it. Flipping love it. I wish I started that earlier. So okay. I was just afraid to do this new thing because it was different and I'd always wanted to do this concept, but I felt, gosh, I didn't think I'd be doing it this year. And then I was worried that my landlord would charge me rent if they saw me, having another business. Haha, foolish Anna, they're going to charge you anyway. So I should have done that earlier, and I would have loved that during the lockdown because I defined myself through my job, and all of my self-esteem, my self-confidence, everything sits on this chef jacket that I wear. So during the lockdown, I made the most of that time to enjoy what I could, but I'd have enjoyed it a hell of a lot more if I'd launched the takeaway earlier. I only launched the takeaway a week or two before we opened the restaurant. So yeah, I'd have definitely I'd have jumped in 2 feet faster on that front, I think.
Okay. And what would you have kept the restaurant itself closed and carried on with the takeaway?
I think I'd have opened the restaurant on the 4th. I mean, this is in hindsight. Okay. Because and I would have advertised the opening of the restaurant earlier, and I would have really been pushing that. But it's so easy to say what you would do differently now. Yeah. But yeah, I know now that I'm open that I'm doing enough covers to justify being open. So yeah, I can say that I should. But before this town is like a ghost town during July and August normally. So I wasn't to know that it wouldn't be that way.
Mm-hmm. And Roberta, what about you listening to Anna? Would you have checked? Would you have opened earlier, having listened to her say what she's experienced, or are you happy that you're going to open next week and that's the plan?
Yeah, no, I don't think I would have changed. I'm happy to have had this time to really think everything through. I mean, we've not been doing anything, like I said, we've been doing deliveries. So that's kind of kept some money coming through. We have had a rent reduction, which has been amazing. Like, our landlord's been fantastic actually throughout all of this. So I've been really lucky in that scenario where I've not had this extreme pressure to reopen. But yeah, so no, I don't think I would have changed. I mean, God knows how things are going to go next week. I'm scared, stroke confident. We've got like, when we opened up the bookings, they filled up really fast. So everyone's eager to come back to the restaurant, which is fantastic. It's just don't quite know what to expect. But I mean, I'm always actually quite nervous about doing a service again. It's been so long. But really excited and really looking forward to it as well.
Okay. And Alex, what about you? Would you change anything?
I don't think I'd have changed when we reopened. I think it was very important to me that we came back better. And I think this time has given me more space creatively than I've ever had. And I cherish that. I give grateful thanks. I think controversially, the only thing I wouldn't have done is, so last month we did 3 like home delivery boxes every other week. And if I had my time again, I wouldn't have gone anywhere near that. And if anyone suggested, should we do home delivery, I'd have cut their hands off. I think probably it's the least I've enjoyed my job at any point. I never want to see a vac pack machine again. I hate packing tape. I hate everything about the process. So yeah, I don't think I'd have done that. I think actually I'd have relaxed, and we did that because I was happy. I saw so much activity from everybody else. I think I'd have actually just enjoyed this time for us to be cooking and creating and talking about food and finding new suppliers and interrogating why more. And I don't think I'd have given myself 4 weeks of high blood pressure to do deliveries. But no, otherwise, like, the universe has its way, and it kind of leads you down the right path, I think. At the moment, September feels like a good idea. Historically, it'll probably be a terrible idea, and I'll be crying down the phone to you. But
I'm always here for you, Alex, if you need someone to cry to. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you all so much. It was really, really interesting to listen to your different points of view on stuff. And good luck to Alex and Roberta on actually opening. And Anna, obviously, good luck with everything going forward. And hopefully we will avoid any further lockdowns, because that, as we have all said, would be worst case scenario, I think, for everybody. So thank you all very much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cara.
We hope you enjoyed this interview, and if you have any comments, feel free to tweet us or comment on the post. We're making all of our interviews available to download. And finally, if you like what we do, whether it's our podcast or our videos or even our features, please head over to our Patreon page and support us there. This episode of Grilled is sponsored by Rationale, your leading provider in multifunctional hot food preparation equipment. Register now for a free Rationale live demo at www.rationale-online.com.